Oh, yeah. 1-800-449-8255. Oh, here it comes, you guys. It's the big one. You got a crowd around your computer screen today. Everybody. I don't care where you are. You could be in Andromeda. I hope you are somewhere in the galaxy Andromeda, and you're tuned in today to the Clark the Shark Show right here on YouTube at 1-800-449-8255 from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkerphone. Excellence in Broadcasting Shark Network, where we're talking about just the most incredible album in history. Definitely, well, I don't know if it's the best Stones album. That's hard to say, but maybe it is. I don't know, you guys. 1969. Rolling Stones, Let It Bleed. You talk about the band that went to the future before everyone else. I mean, the Beatles were pretty rad, you guys, back in the USSR, and the White Album was before this. And they had some really advanced sounding material all over that album. And of course, all over Abbey Road and even Let It Be. And John Lennon would say, Mick and the Stones, they're always copying us, let it be, let it bleed, let it be. I don't know if the Stones were copying you, Jono, with Let It Bleed. I don't think they were. I think Let It Bleed, it had to be Let It Bleed. That had to be what it's called, because all in all, a brick in the wall. It's just right for the moment, you guys. Now let's frame the situation here. 1968, the Stones put out Beggar's Banquet, which was a total reinvention of the Rolling Stones. It was a total makeover of their sound, and the Stones went to the future with Beggar's Banquet as they went back to their past, to their blues, roots, rock and roll blues, they went, whatever they were trying to do, baby, they accomplished it on that album. And after just the mess that was Satanic Majesties in 1967, during the psychedelic days, Beggar's Banquet had nothing to do with that. It was just this total brand new thing. And the Stones were like, look, rock and roll is going to sound like this. And every other band in the world, they had to step up their game, you guys, and take it to the next level, like the Stones. And, there were a lot of bands upping their game about 68, 69, 70. But I don't think anyone ever caught up with this album, the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed, 1969, where they go to an even another level from Beggar's Banquet here. That album was bluesy, rootsy, but now this album, the Stones are just being inventive here now, and they're just going crazy. And in many ways, this album is transitional because you got a lot of songs, on it that are going from the 60s into the 70s. It definitely sounds 70s, you guys, this album. There's no doubt about it. The Stones are very advanced. But even within the grooves of this album, you can feel the change in the Rolling Stones from the beginning of this album to the end. And you can kind of see the future of albums to come later from these songs on Let It Bleed. 1969, what an album. Is this the greatest Stones album? I think so, yeah, but is this one of the greatest rock and roll albums in the history of all rock, in the history of all music? I believe it is, you guys. There's The Who, Who's Next, Led Zeppelin 4, and the Beatles' White Album and Sgt. Pepper, and then there's this, you guys, the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed is definitely one of those top 10, top 20 rock albums of all time. But you got to put Beggar's Banquet, Sticky Fingers, and Exile in there too. It's tough at the top, because you got the Beatles, Revolver, and all that, Abbey Road, Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 4, and maybe even Led Zepp 3, and all these Frank Zappa albums and Bowie albums, and there's good shit, man. But what a year, 1969. Incredible year, man. The Who, Tommy. Great album. It has nothing to do with this. The Stones are much more profound and much more advanced. Whereas the Who are like, you can tell bands like Rush were into the Who with the Keith Moon's insane drumming and all that. And, Styx and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes and, all that. You could tell they all heard the Who, Tommy. But there were other bands, that heard the Rolling Stones, Let It Bleed. And I would say for just the base foundation of the 70s, 80s, 90s, this album is much more influential than The Who or Led Zeppelin or maybe even the Beatles themselves, you guys. The Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed really declares that the Stones are the world's greatest rock and roll band. And it's weird, you guys, because the Stones are they're just a rock and roll 4/4. They're just nothing. They're just these guys, Charlie Watts. They're not very good. Nobody's all that good, but you put them all together and they make incredible music. Mick's not the world's greatest singer, and Keith's not the world's greatest guitar, and Mick Taylor isn't even on this album that much, and yet his spirit is all over this album, and it's all over Beggar's Banquet. He's not even on that. But I still consider both of these Mick Taylor era albums because his spirit, his breath of life is all over these 4 incredible Rolling Stones albums, whether he's on them or not. But the Stones definitely, the way they go to the future, and they tell all the other bands in rock, you're going to rock like us. You're not going to rock like The Who. You're not going to rock like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles. You're all going to follow us, the Rolling Stones, and Let It Bleed from the greatest rock and roll band in the world. The world's greatest rock and roll band, you guys, the Rolling Stones, most ahead of their time, and yet they're right with the times, most advanced. They create just this down and dirty bluesy culture, just this down and dirty thing that like Creedence and the Grateful Dead and those other bands, the Jefferson Airplane, nobody can touch the down and dirty bluesy, muddy, icky, sweaty, grimy Rolling Stones. Nobody can touch it, man. That's why they're the biggest and the best, the biggest crowds. They play stadiums. Even right now in 2023, Mick could be 80, 81 years old, and the Rolling Stones next year in 2024, they'll be touring with Bill Wyman and Mick Taylor. They'll all be 80-year-old guys playing stadiums because the crowd can just feel you want to be at the party that is the Rolling Stones. You want to be there with them. Even if you're not with them, you just want to sit down in your living room and pull up a cold one and just watch the video of the Stones, 1972 or 1978, Some Girls Live. You just want to be part of the Stones family right here on the Clark the Shark Show at 1-800-449-8255. And man, what an album. What a band. This is 5 stars. I don't care what the critics give it, but they're going to give it 5 stars, you guys, of course. It could only get 5 stars. This could get 6 out of 5. It's that good. And Gimme Shelter. Oh, man. Sounds like the 1970s, you guys. Great song. Great song. Solid. Down, dirty, ugly, sweaty, Gimme Shelter. Love it. And the Stones are declaring with the first song on this album that they are ahead of everybody. And Love in Vain, bluesy, slow. The train left the station. sad, man. I know the feeling of Love in Vain, man. Gosh. When Angie went away, Love in Vain, man. She'll forget me. Bluesy, crimey. Fuck, you gotta see the live video with Mick Taylor, Love in Vain. The guitar solo, amazing. Mick's only on, I think, 2 of these songs, you guys, on the album, 3 and 4. Country Honk, which is like the Stones version of the Beatles' Revolution. You know, Honky Tonk Woman, gosh, you guys, not on this album, but its spirit is all over this album. Yeah, man. Revolution, John Lennon, you know, that heavy, hard rockin' Revolution. And then the Beatles just fucked around with it on the White Album. And the Stones do that here with Country Honk. But it's fucking cool. I love it. And, of course, Live With Me is where the Stones really go to the future here. This song is nothing like the rest of this album. Live With Me sounds like it's off Black and Blue, or it's only rock and roll. It's just way ahead of its time. It almost sounds like it's off Some Girls, or, you know, fucking, it's too good for Emotional Rescue, you guys, but Tattoo You, Live With Me is just, man, it's like it shoots water rats and it feeds them too with geese. Don't you want to be between the sheets and live with me? Live with us. Love it. It's so far ahead of its time. There's no reverb. The Stones are just like, Charlie's really drumming nice on that. Normally, I'm not the biggest Charlie Watts drumming fanatic. But, man, Live With Me. I love his drumming on that. Of course, Let It Bleed, title track, amazing. Ahead of its time. You know, the Stones are declaring right here, we are ahead of everyone. Our music is the most advanced. We are the most advanced, you guys. Let it bleed. We all need someone we can cream on. Let it bleed down dirty. Love it. Fucking love side 1 of this, you guys. But side 2, Midnight Rambler, which kind of sounds 1960s. You can tell it's one of the earlier tracks, perhaps, recorded on this, and yet it's up to date. It sounds good, bluesy, sticky, sweaty, swampy. I love Midnight Rambler, you guys. Fucking awesome. You got the Silver. You get kind of an early Keith. You know, love it. You know, I loved Salt of the Earth with Keith. But you got the Silver is where Keith becomes Keith, you guys. This is way before Happy or any of that. You got the Silver, Keith, a real statement. Monkey Man, once again, the Stones sound like the 1970s, like 1975. They're way ahead of their time, you guys, with Monkey Man. Incredible song. You know, and the one song I feel just is inappropriate and doesn't fit in on the album is You Can't Always Get What You Want, even though it's a great classic. I would rather they had Honky Tonk Women on the album than that, or maybe made the grooves thinner and squeezed Honky Tonk in here somewhere. But yeah, fuck yeah, dude. I love You Can't Always Get What You Want. What a song. It's amazing. It just seems like too happy of a vibe for this album. And yet it still goes with this album somehow. You know, you could tell it was recently recorded. It was recorded about a year before this album was released. It's like a 1968 Stones song. It maybe sounds a little too advanced for Beggar's Banquet era, but I like it, you guys. I love it. You can't always get what you want. A 60s sounding vibe going into the 1970s. Yeah, I'll take it, man. Whatever. It's on there. And it creates and completes this amazing Rolling Stones bluesy album. There's not a lot of Mick Taylor here, you guys, not yet. But his spirit is all over this. And I want to talk about Brian Jones. He's on this too, just a little bit. Him and Mick Taylor are both just on this a little bit. You can tell the Stones were trying to be walking on eggshells and trying to be as dainty and careful as they could with this transition. I think Brian Jones electrocuted himself with the pool light. That's how he died, you guys. I've said this in other videos. I don't think he was murdered by that guy, the construction crew. Who knows? Maybe he was. But I know that on Beggar's Banquet, there's not a whole lot of Brian Jones. And, the Stones were saying he was a flake and all this. And he probably was. And definitely on this album, he's barely here. I don't even think he was in the band anymore by this time. But Mick Taylor, once Mick Taylor comes in on, especially live when the Stones play with Mick Taylor, I want you guys to watch that 1972. It's basically Sticky Fingers and Exile live. It's before Goat's Head Soup. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones. Mick Taylor's incredible, you guys, live. And why that guy ever quit the band, we will never know. But I wish this album would have had more Mick Taylor. That would have been fucking awesome, you guys. The Rolling Stones, 1969, way ahead of its time. Let It Bleed, and yet way locked in perfectly with the times. You can feel Vietnam and just all the social unrest and all the trouble in America and England too. With this album, you really feel just this chaotic depression and yet this happy ecstasy too. It's weird. This album is depressing and yet kind of uplifting in a bluesy, grimy way, you guys. It captures the blues way better than Led Zeppelin 1 or 2. Better than The Who Live at Leeds. I hate to say that, you guys. Better than David Bowie, The Man Who Sold the World, or, any of that, or Bowie's, second album, which I fucking love. I love that album. But this album, Let It Bleed, you guys, is not a transitional album. I would say neither is Beggar's Banquet. Beggar's Banquet was not an arrival album. It was a complete makeover, like a new building built in place of the old Rolling Stones. But this album is like a new building built in place of Beggar's Banquet, you guys. The Rolling Stones, 1969, bluesy, grimy, down and dirty. Mick Taylor, I don't care if he's on the album or not, you guys. Even Brian Jones' spirit is here, you guys. Let It Bleed, 1969. It better captures the times than any other rock and roll album of that year. It's fascinating. It's amazing. This might be the greatest rock and roll album in the history of rock ever, ever, ever recorded. I'm not kidding, you guys. It might be. The Rolling Stones, Let It Bleed, 1969, where every single song is amazing. And right here, you guys, I'm Clark the Shark, and you just got the only review that you will ever want or ever need of this Rolling Stones album from me, Clark the Shark. I'm 58 years old. I grew up with all these songs, all these Rolling Stones albums. I've seen the Stones 3 times live, you guys. That's not very much for some people. But you got to remember, I've been to like 200 concerts. Me, Clark the Shark, I've seen everybody. The Grateful Dead, Rush, The Who. Fuck, dude. Everything, I've seen it. You name it, I've fucking seen it, you guys. But the Rolling Stones are the world's greatest rock and roll band. Not just because they're great or they're good or Mick Taylor or any of that. It's because they're down, dirty, grimy. Mick's got 8 kids. They're just sleazy fucking scumbags. They're irresponsible. And yet they're responsible. Mick has 8 kids and 8 wives, and yet it comes away you believe he's responsible. Don't ask me how, you guys. And Keith is the same way. When these guys die, God's gonna be like, fuck it, you guys are going to heaven. I don't give a shit. You guys are the fucking Rolling Stones at 1-800-449-8255. I don't care how many sins you guys have committed or laws or rules you've broken. You guys are mankind in a nutshell. The Rolling Stones, you guys. Let It Bleed, 1969. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show, 1-800-449-8255 from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not a microphone, you guys. When the Wolfman Jack on crack, Clark the Shark, speaks into the golden EIB Sharkerphone, it's not a mere microphone. If you want a fucking microphone, go to Guitar Center and buy one. But you ain't ever going to find a golden EIB Sharkerphone, because you can only find that right here on the Clark the Shark Show. 1-800-449-8255. And I'm out of here, people. Peace.